Hello, and welcome to Failing to Save the Earth. This podcast is for all the water and land protectors out there, those who have struggled in the past or are struggling now to protect our natural world. The podcast is devoted to the idea that failure is not possible when you're standing up for life. In the spirit of those who came before us and for the love of those who will come after us, this podcast is for us to come together, to heal, to forgive, to dream, to find our power, and to lift up the stories of Earth come alive to defend itself, because that is what each and every one of you are. Welcome to our very, very first podcast. This is part of a 6 series podcast, and I'm one of your hosts, Cherri Foytlin. Each podcast, I'll have a different host, and they're always someone who's just like badass, who I love. Oh, I cursed. Anyway, badass, who I love.
You got through like 14 seconds.
I know. Yeah. So here we are. The thing about it is, like, there's no real rules except to say that we're gonna celebrate each other. We're gonna be good to each other, and I'm gonna try not to curse, which I have already broken, but we're gonna go from here. Okay. I may use alternative words, but we'll get there. I'll do my best. Okay. So as I said, my guest here today is Karen Savage, who's one of my greatest friends, and we have just done so much stuff together in the last more than a decade at this point. And my kids love her, and I love her kids, and so she's just gonna talk to us a little bit. But I wanted to tell you her bio. Karen Savage is an investigative journalist who has covered climate litigation, resistance to pipeline construction, juvenile justice and policing. Her work has appeared in Drilled News, Climate Liability News, In These Times, Project Earth, Juvenile Justice Information Exchange, Bridge the Gulf, Youth Today, Truth Out, and City Limits. Karen is an alum of the Craig Newmark Graduate School of Journalism, where she won the Sidney Hillman Award for Social Justice Reporting. And man, is she a social justice reporter. How you doing today, Karen?
Hey, Cherri, I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm always good.
I know.
Good to hear your voice again, though.
Yeah, same to you.
So check this out. I know I read the bio, but one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot about with this particular series is I want to play like a game with each of my co-hosts. Karen, we're going to play like a word association game for a few minutes. Karen, are you up for that?
Yeah, I think so.
And then maybe we might discuss it a little bit, or maybe we just might move on to the next one, to how we're feeling. Okay?
Sounds good.
All right. Your first word is story.
Reporting.
How about journalism?
Writing.
Interesting. Okay, so I noticed that you put reporting on story and then writing on journalism. Is there a difference between those two?
Between reporting and journalism?
Yeah, between telling a story and doing journalism for a social justice cause.
There could be. To me, reporting is when you write the story and you have to talk to like all sides involved. And even though there may be one side that's, pretty clearly in the wrong or has like oppressed the other side, you still, in order to do journalism, have to talk to them and get their point of view. Doesn't mean you have to let their point of view stand. If they told you bold-faced lies, you can explain to your readers or listeners that they told you bold-faced lies and explain how you know. Storytelling is a little bit different because storytelling to me is community members or individuals or people or whoever you talk to kind of telling their story from their perspective solely. And in that kind of thing, you don't always have to get both sides, to me.
Okay, I got another one for you. You're going to love this one. Chem risk.
Haha, victory.
Yes, people don't know maybe, but Karen and I faced a SLAPP suit. How many years ago was it now?
Oh God, I think they sued us in 2014.
Yeah. I remember getting served on my daughter's birthday. We were having a birthday party and I walked outside to get some supplies I left in the car and they jumped on me.
They couldn't find me. They wanted to serve me in my classroom and the school was like, no, you can't go to the classroom, but you can leave the papers here.
Explain why we got served.
So we were sued. We wrote this story about this company called Chemrisk, and now they had done what they called an independent study showing, apparently, according to them, showing that people who cleaned up BP's oil after the Deepwater Horizon disaster were not made sick by cleaning up the oil. So we wrote that and we explained like the history of this company and how it wasn't an independent study because they had the same PR guy, Chemrisk did, and BP, they shared the PR guy. And so we just kind of went that out and they didn't like it one bit. So they demanded we take it down and we were like, no, we're not. That's the whole point. Leaving it up. And so then they sued us.
Yeah, they sued the shizzle out of us. um, yeah, and it went on for years, and like you did so much work in that. I was so just glad to have you with you. It was a wonderful co-defendant. But yeah, that was crazy, and that was honestly, that was one of the first times I could actually feel like that we did have a victory. So much of this work, and I know this, that out there it feels like, you're trying to stop a pipeline, you're trying to help homelessness, and the problem is so big, and then when they come at you, and they will, with intimidation tactics like a SLAPP suit, which is what SLAPP suit stand for?
Strategic limitation of public participation.
Right. And we took that one all the way to the Massachusetts Supreme Court, and we won.
Yep. Yeah. Well, they sued us first in New York. The New York judge is like, why are you even in this court? These people don't live here. So the judge threw it out. And then they sued us again. Like, we were like, yay, we won. We're all excited for like 4 days. And then they served us again. And so they sued us in Massachusetts. And that's where we eventually got done with it.
The thing about it was, like, we were so like bold and still like, we are not taking this down and blah, blah, blah. When on the inside between us, we had 10 kids?
Yeah.
And I personally was a little scared shitless. Not so much because they might take something from me. We didn't have anything, neither you nor I. Sometimes you might even think to yourself, I'm doing this wrong. But the more we looked into it, we realized, no, we did not. Like, this is true,
Yeah. I remember like two distinct on what you just said. I remember one of my kids asking me what they were going to take and were they going to take my bed, because I guess that was like the most valuable thing my kid could think that I have in the house. And I'm like, no, they're not. That is like 12 years old. It says there's not even a headboard at that point. I remember that. And I remember when we first found John Richmond, who was our lawyer. And I remember being so relieved because he was like so calm and he's like, no, you did the right thing. You're fine. And that's kind of just what you said. And then I also remember telling the people at CUNY, because when I started school while the lawsuit was going on, and I was really afraid that they were going to find out that I was being sued and be like, okay, you got to go. But it was the opposite. They're like, oh, wow, you wrote the truth and they sued you and you're still here. Yeah, keep going. And they were really supportive.
Awesome.
And so I was excited about that.
Yeah, that's really cool. If I remember correctly, at the time, it felt like we got a lot of support from some places and not so much from others.
Yeah, that was true.
New word. Popo. The popo.
Oh, that's the next word?
Yeah.
Oh God. Stay away. That's 2 words. I don't know.
It'll work.
Okay.
Stay away. I like that one. Okay, let's do that. Let's stay away from Lo et la vie.
What's the word? I laughed over you. Sorry.
Lo et la vie.
Family.
It really was like that, wasn't it?
It was.
A lot of times.
It really was. If I had an image, the image that came to me is one of our friends was a very good coffee maker with whipped cream and all the toppings. I remember distinctly that friend making coffee for me, and it was delicious.
Yeah, it's funny how, like, when you're in that kind of situation, when you're in a direct action campaign, start trying to use your body in some way to affect change or to delay something. It's funny how those little tiny, like, little moments that you have that are just like, just a little bit of comfort. And they mean so much in that minute, and that coffee, that was so helpful. Yeah, for sure. All right, last word, and then we'll go on to the actual thing. But how about failed?
Camera risk.
Oh, nice one. They sure did. They tried hard. They did fail.
Hard. They feel hard.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Thank you. Yeah. And one of the things that, I really wanted to talk to today about with people is like what that it is that you feel like you do and what do you feel like, your role is, greater role outside of like usual labels. Like, obviously you're a mother, but my question is like, where do you think you fit in as far as either social justice movements or just inside of like humanity itself?
Oh, God.
I know. I didn't say it was going to be an easy interview.
So I guess the only way I can answer that is that my role in social movement stuff thus far has been documenting and reporting, and to make sure part of documenting is also providing safety, because folks who would choke somebody out if there's not a camera around are a little bit more hesitant to do so if there are people around with cameras. So that's a role in storytelling and making sure that these important struggles for life, which is really what it is, for the life of the planet, for the environment, or social justice, are not forgotten or swept away by like what the Kardashians are doing, or whatever the last thing Elon Musk bought, because we sometimes get really distracted by like big quote unquote major news stories, and these other really super important things are happening that folks are not reporting on. And so I guess what I would say is I've seen my role is as one of reporting on things that nobody else wants to report. I always like when there are other reporters around, but the stories I seek out are ones that that I don't feel like there are a lot of other people going to be there reporting on.
And where is that mostly? Stories that people aren't reporting on?
I feel like a lot of times it's resistance camps, resistance to fossil fuel infrastructure, resistance in some cases to police brutality or police killings, although that's gotten much more attention since George Floyd and some of the other things that are going on. Anywhere, they're mostly social justice issues, I guess.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I got to stop here for a second and tell you why one of the reasons I am doing, this particular broadcast, Failing to Save the Earth. One reason is because, when you get to the end of a campaign, it is super important to look back and be able to tell your story, because that is how you're going to define like how you are in yourself. What the words that you say are going to be what comes back to, from my perspective, what comes back to yourself, right? And how you feel about things. And, one of the important things I want people to understand about this particular podcast is we didn't call it Saving the Earth because honestly, the earth is much too big for one person or one group to save. And a lot of times we see people in these like little pockets of this little space. And you're right, they're not getting what they need as far as like getting the word out, because we all know that the more attention comes to something, then the more like, it gets out there and things can change, right? So which is our ultimate goal always, to make change. Yeah. So I was reading and there was this article and it said that basically that the Low-A-Law-B campaign, our campaign in South Louisiana to stop the Bayou Bridge pipeline, the tail end of the Dakota Access Pipeline, Bayou Bridge, that it was a failure, that our struggle was a failure. And of course, I looked behind the website and realized that it was an oil media group that was saying this. And I thought to myself, man, I guess that's okay if they think that, but we did a lot of really good stuff. From the beginning, we had, come up with a plan of what we wanted to do and what we wanted to achieve. And when we go through that plan, aside from stopping the Bayou Bridge pipeline, we can say we were able to pick, all of those off. And even though we didn't stop the pipeline, we still came out with 11 acres. It's a food forest. And my first thing I want to talk about with you a little bit, I guess more, was how does opposing media, like our enemies and stuff, I mean, how much influence do they have over our stories? And especially when someone like you's not there to tell that story, they get to write the story at that point. How much influence does that play in like traditional media? Also in a lot, like I feel like how we see ourselves as social justice warriors.
Oh, it's a big question.
I know.
Which is hard for me to do both of them. But I think that you're right on like the crux of a lot of the issues with telling the stories of like different movements. And there's so much social justice resistance and successes and movement building that has happened that unless you are really, really deeply researching stuff, you don't have any idea it happened. I read something, I think it was Bill McKibben wrote this morning. I was reading it about Lexington and how the biggest mass arrest on a civil disobedience, situation in Massachusetts history was in Lexington resisting the war. I had no idea. And I've lived in Massachusetts for a long time.
Right.
And so like stuff like that gets buried and the people who are really on point and really selfless in so many ways, in so many situations, particularly people who put their bodies on the line in the way that folks at Loyola V or Line 3 or some of these other resistance campaigns have done. It's so selfless, but I think it needs to be amplified. I think that the world needs to know that there are people doing this. And so like to the average person, if you're holding a sign that says whatever, you might feel really like you're out there, you're calling a lot of attention to yourself. But in reality, it's just one thing. It's okay. You're doing your one thing. And so telling the stories of all of this helps everyone see the connections and see that everybody has a role. And when the story is controlled by the corporations or the institution that's doing the oppressing, whatever the situation is, then what they do is they, cast all kinds of dispersions or doubt on, these weirdo tree huggers, or, why don't they get a job, or, all of these things. And it's a disinformation campaign is what it is. Because they have no idea actually what has happened because they're not there, they're not reporting on it. And that is the message that gets picked up by media. And not to knock media, although some of it, some media definitely deserves to be knocked, but even reporters or more mainstream outlets that are trying to report accurately and do a good job covering some of these resistance movements are under time pressure. So if you get a press release from the pipeline company, you'll go with it. You may not question it as a reporter. I mean, it's not what should happen, but in reality is what happens. And that every little bit lets the narrative be controlled by the company.
They have gotten so crafty too, haven't they? Like, remember they put out that video about me that was just, hogwash. And then they had just done, remember in that time that reporters just showed up at the gate?
Yep.
And they were definitely from like a pro-oil place.
Yeah, there's a consulting firm / PR group that's very, very good at that. They have done that for pipeline resistance, and they've got people posing as reporters, and also for some of the climate litigation that's happened by different groups, different people. But it's definitely a tactic to gain information from the other side, but then also able to sow information to the public and people that are reading things or watching videos or whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the worst part is that very often, from my perspective, like they listen to someone in a uniform or someone who has power, and they do that on purpose because like they're doing that to devalue what actually happened. Take, for instance, when me and you were at the protest in Baton Rouge around Alton Sterling, and both of you and I at that point were there as media people, and very obviously so. I know that we had like press passes on and things like that, and that was the first time I actually remember that they absolutely targeted the media people. And then when they had us all in jail, remember they had come on the news and people had showed me like, they had come on the news and they had just said all this stuff that wasn't even true about what was going on that day because they had absolute control, and I think that's a tactic that they've picked up.
Yeah, my co-reporter guy named Marco had gotten great audio of one of the law enforcement representatives talking about how the protesters that day were throwing chunks of concrete. Now, first of all, they'd have to be really strong to throw chunks of concrete. Yeah. But then somebody, and you couldn't tell who it was because it was just audio, asked the follow-up question, well, was anyone hurt? And he's like, they were wearing helmets. And like beyond that, like there was one reporter, and it was like a press conference, so probably many dozens of reporters at that point that were there, and only one person questioned that. And then when he said they were wearing helmets, there was not any follow-up. So like, how are you
First
not?
of all, I don't remember anybody helmets, and secondly, like I have the video. Actually, the lawyer has it now, but where we were all just kind of standing there. Everybody had this weird it was kind of this weird feeling where nobody really knew what was going to happen next. And the thing I remember most about it was how everyone was so peaceful and quiet in that moment before the police rushed in.
Yeah, I remember hearing there were like what are those cicadas in the trees, and it was so beautiful. It was a beautiful day. And looking back after at that point I'd covered quite a few protests and I covered some since, and that group of people are among the calmest of all of the protests I have covered.
Right.
But they were met with some of the harshest response and brutality of any of them.
Right. And now, a word from our sponsors. Just kidding, we don't have sponsors.
Hello? Hello? Can you hear me now?
Does it feel like no one is listening?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Taking action in a vacuum will lead you nowhere, but just remember, you are the driver of your own story.
Hello? Hello?
Telling your true and personal account has power, and it can be empowering to share.
Can you hear me now?
A good personal story has an arc with a wind-up, a climax, and a conclusion. Keep it simple and focused. Remember to speak from your heart and experiences. Never borrow or use another person's stories or experiences as your own.
Hey, it's working. Can you hear me now?
What's up?
What's up?
What's up?
Don't forget, the first step to organizing for social, climate, and environmental justice is not to talk, but to listen. What does your community need? Who in your community cares about the things that you do? By listening and sharing your story with others, you can never have failing words. And only then will you know what's up! So how do you think it's best if an organization or an event or an act or something like that, how do they take control of their own story? I know we were very lucky that we had you, honestly, because, you were always right there. So whenever something kind of pretty strange was going on, you would be taking pictures and video. And like when our friends got arrested in the swamp, like, you were there. I mean, you were stuck on an island for a little bit, but without water. But unfortunately, and I wish this was the case, I wish everybody could have someone like you, but what can they do if to like keep control of their own story?
Yeah, that's a tough one. And I've seen some groups do a really good job. They put out their own media. They have trained up folks so they do Facebook live streaming and do their own reporting there. And, it doesn't, or Instagram live or, different social media live streams, which is one of the most effective ways. And then to follow up with, like there's an action happening on a Tuesday morning. Most people can't watch it, but then follow up with, a shorter condensed, minute and a half or so video explaining what happened happen. I think that that's really important, to use those social media tools to their advantage, and to also at the same time, you guys reached out to me and said, hey, this is going to happen and we'd love to have you down here reporting. And it was just really good luck that I was able to, for me, that I was able to be down there because of the way my schedule worked out. But I would say to groups to also, cultivate, ask reporters, hey, we'd love you to come and be embedded and be here. And it's difficult though, because, as a reporter, I think part of what people need to understand is that folks who put their bodies on the line are really risking a lot. So you have to kind of be able to be security conscious and not put anyone in danger by your reporting. So there's a lot of gray lines, but just find reporters that you can work with, who you trust, and, try to keep that going. And at the same time, if you're working with a reporter, like you guys work with me, and, I told you flat out, like I have to talk to the law enforcement and get the other side. I have to talk to security. I have to talk to the pipeline people. I have to do that. And because that is the kind of reporting that makes the story stronger. If I was just out there on my own saying, ooh, this is what happened and that's what happened and look at how bad these people are, that is great. But the reporting with getting the other side and then kind of like saying, oh, but this is actually what happened, that is more powerful from the reporting point of view. Now, from an individual doing media for the organization or for the campaign, that isn't, that's not needed. Just keep that camera going, keep researching. And, if you find something interesting, learn how to do public records requests. It's not hard. If there's any group out there listening, I'd be happy to help you navigate that. Do research, do corporate research, do research on the CEOs, on all, the security companies. Know who you're dealing with, I guess, is a really big piece of advice. And then just keep telling your story and putting out the press releases with the quotes and making people available so that reporters who do want to do that work, the ones who I mentioned a few minutes ago that are busy and on deadlines and stuff, they can get in touch with you. I think you seem to do that really well. Whenever I was around you, there was always a ton of media and you were going from place to place to place, person to person, trying to make sure that people reporting on the story got some time. Because unfortunately, it's probably, I know if I was in that situation, I'd be like, oh, leave me alone. But it's really important to be that person that's willing to tell the story. And one thing I think about Loie Lviv that really worked well is that you were very good at doing that, as was Anne and a couple other people. So that narrative, I remember shooting in the swamp. One day there were arrests, and one of the water protectors that was arrested just had somehow the wherewithal. I was standing there trying not to fall in the water or get pushed into the water. And that person just turned around and started telling me what happened, kind of like they were broadcasting their own arrest. And I'm like, oh my God, thank you. So that kind of stuff, don't be afraid to, as if you can do it, and I don't know that I could, but as things are going down, turn to that camera and explain exactly what's happening, So those are all ways. And there's ways that young people are doing it today that, there's other advice out there. So I would also say stay in touch with other groups, because there's probably stuff going on that is successful that I'm not even thinking of.
Thank you. What advice do you think that you would give to like a journalist, like say from one of the papers or any kind of media, and they wanted to like spend some time with an action camp, and this would be like water protectors, land protectors, what advice would you give them?
I would tell them, what was that?
Bring mosquito repellent.
Bring mosquito repellent. Bring enough supplies so you don't die in the swamp, but also bring a camera because it's beautiful. No, I would tell them before they even reach out, please do your research. I know you dealt with it, and I myself even dealt with, other reporters calling me wanting to know how do I get to camp? Okay, you can Google that. You can there's stuff that you can figure out without taking up a ton of everyone's time. Be respectful because people are busy, so know your stuff before you're going in. Go in with an open mind, maybe do some research about other resistance camps so you know what you're doing. And then kind of just go with the flow and watch and learn. I learned so much from all of the people, both in Louisiana and I was in Minnesota last summer, from all of the water protectors, stuff that I had no idea how to do. I'm like, oh my goodness, these folks could survive if, something awful happens. I'd be crying and wondering where my next meal is, my next piece of pizza or something, and it would be awful. Surviving. I'm like, okay, that's cool. So be willing and open to learn. And also, please do not just regurgitate a corporate press release, because that's actually just lazy journalism anywhere you go.
Yeah, for sure. I was thinking about while you're talking when we, I'm not sure if you're at this one, but I know that I had talked to you about it when BP, a lot of people don't know, but I really started this work around the BP oil spill, and that's where I met you. We were dealing with that, and you had already worked on Katrina stuff at that point, right?
Yeah.
But I remember going to DC and I spoke with Hugh Kaufman, and he's one of the original EPA folks that started the EPA, and he's brilliant. And I remember talking to him, and I was really expressing how sad it was, the number of people that we knew from BP who were really, really sick because of the stuff they sprayed on that oil, and because of the oil itself too. And then it was sad, like super sad about the animals, but a lot of people didn't even hear about the human health effects, you know, and BP like just barely paid out for it. So the point is, I was talking to him and he said, you need to get those people in front of the camera. He said, like, go to where they are and get them telling their story. Their story is what power is. And I remember just being like, yeah, okay, and that's what we did, me and you, for the longest time. Help me out here. What did we work on? We worked on this KXL.
Oh yeah.
Noé La Vie, a lot of stuff,
Sinkhole.
Yeah.
The sinkhole. We went to Africa Town, went to Alabama to where they were going to do. Remember the guy that said that they were the community members who were told by the company they were going to quote unquote take the cancer out of their rocks.
Yes. Remember the Everglades? They were going to put that bike walk thing all the way through the middle of the precious Everglades.
Yeah.
Won that one.
Yeah.
So my point is, like, we can't allow them to continue to like to hijack the stories of who we are and what we do. And I think that they had a very difficult time doing that around the DAPL movement. And part of that was because of the story of who and the place that they were and all of those things. And so, I always think that's a good place to start. Like, how will you tell your story? And I could have just went with the story that the oil company came up with, which was like, it was a total failure, good for nothing. I just knew it wasn't true. I mean, and I just knew that we did some pretty amazing things that had never been done before. And yeah, that's kind of what this series is about a little bit. How do you turn those thoughts around in your head when you think that what you're doing is a failure or that you failed at it? I know, Karen, that you have went through like some shit because of the work that you did with us. And that at some point, even though it wasn't true, at some point, some people may have saw you as like like more in us than what was actually happening, and I think they did that as a way to discredit the great work that you were doing and the fact that the truth was coming out. And I just want to bring that to people's attention. Like, what kind of things do you feel like you had to deal with that was kind of, state sponsored or socially done that kept you from, doing stuff like telling the story? In what ways?
Yeah. And I'll go back. Can I go back 1 minute though? Because you said something that I wanted to jump in and say that I should have said before, because it's always so in front of my mind that sometimes I don't say it because it's almost obvious. It's like you said, talk to the affected people, like the folks in St. James, which is where the end of that pipeline is. Those people that are directly affected by whatever it is you're reporting on are always the voices that should be prioritized, and sometimes reporters get that all confused. So kind of like that goes in with doing your research. Who are the people who are going to suffer at the hands of whatever is happening?
Right.
So yeah, that's really important. More cameras are always the answer.
Hey, Karen, I just wanted to say thank you for being on the show today. This is our first one. Yay! And we have a lot to talk about. There's a lot going on, but I just always have appreciated you. You're just an amazing, good person. And we don't know what we've done without you sharing our stories, because we didn't have that influx necessarily at Noé La Vie that other campaigns have had. But right now I want to bring on my beautiful, amazing, wonderful daughter, and her name is Jayden Foytlin. She's my, let's see, what are you, number are you?
I think I'm 4.
Number 4, yeah. Yep. Well, I want to let her just come on just a little bit to talk for a minute. And Karen, feel free to jump in here, because I know that you have reported on her story back when her story wasn't huge. But now with Youth v. Gov on Netflix, which is running right now, you can go check it out. She seems to be like a pretty good part of the movie. Have you seen it yet, Karen?
I have not. I'm excited to see it, but I haven't watched it yet.
You have it. It'll make you cry. Get some tissue. Really. I had someone come on my Facebook page and they were just like, it made me laugh. It made me cry. It made me laugh again. It made me cry again. It really kind of does. I think I cried like 3 times.
Oh, all right. I got to watch it.
What do you think about Jane?
I think it's really great. I'm really appreciative of Christy Cooper, the director of it, and all of her team. They were really kind. It was nice when they came down to Louisiana. They were very respectful, and they're just a really good team to work with. And I'm really happy with how the documentary came out.
I love seeing you up there because you're just so beautiful. And I might be a little biased maybe. But yeah, it's a really kind of a big deal because, I saw Leonardo DiCaprio. Did you see that, Karen? Leo tweeted about it.
I saw that. I
And
saw
Mark
there were a lot of
Ruffalo.
good tweets about it. Yeah.
Yeah, the Hulk is talking about Jayden and these 21 youth who sued the government to take action on climate change, and which our government has not done, even though for the last 50 years they've been, steady making things worse without a parent care in the world. It's about, the constitutional rights of young people to an inhabitable planet. And it's a really good show. I was really impressed. I mean, I've seen it in the past, but just seeing it in that way, like on Netflix, and knowing that people, how many countries is it?
I don't exactly remember.
30,
I think it was like 30. Yeah.
Yeah, it's 30 different languages around the world. Yeah, I just can be more proud.
I'm really excited. Like it's just a great opportunity, and just knowing that like it has that much like outreach, it makes me happy to know that much youth will see like all the power that the youth has.
Yeah, thank you. Karen, what do you think?
I think it's amazing. I think that Jayden and all of those kids in Youth v Gov have just been so brave, and from my perspective, that's gone on forever. And from a kid's perspective, I'm sure it's gone on forever, ever and ever. So I'm impressed at hanging in, and how, Jayden and everyone has really not just been part of a lawsuit and like had their name on a paper and gone about their lives, but they've really spoken out and been, proactive and trying to encourage folks to pay more attention to climate issues, and to get our government's attention and say, hey, we got to do something about this. This is really a serious deal. But yay, Jayden, I'm very excited to watch the movie, and also congratulations next year. I hear you going to college in Oregon.
Yep, I'm
very excited.
They actually they had a public showing of the movie, at the college.
Wow.
Isn't that cool?
That is cool. Wow, you're gonna be famous before you get there.
It makes me kind of shy, because I'm really scared that there's going to be somebody that's like, oh, in my class that we saw you, because that happened to me at Rain High, and just going to college and having that same experience will be like definitely like
surreal.
Like making me like really even more scared than I kind of already am.
Yeah.
Well, y'all can check it out on Netflix. It's in the. I made the joke yesterday, Karen, that it's in documentaries, right? I was like, this should be in this shizzle should be in true crime.
Ooh, yeah, it really should.
Because it is bad. It's bad. But yeah. All right. Well, y'all go check it out. And I guess that's a wrap, man. That's like our first episode. Give me a high five. Woo!
Virtual high five,
welcome.
Cherri. I want to say thank you for having me on, and it's been like an amazing time talking to you. And I look back over everything we've done over the last 10 years. I'm like, oh my gosh. So I just appreciate you, and I love you, and thank you.
I love you too. It has for sure been a wild ride, but the story's it's not finished yet. We're still writing it. So yeah, check it. Stay with us next time. Love you, Karen. Thank you. Love you, JJ, of course. Thank you. And we'll talk soon, y'all.